Phoenix just crossed the line. They didn't ask about Steph. They didn't test the waters on Jimmy. They didn't circle around some bench vet to see if the Warriors were desperate. They went straight for the heartbeat of our future. I'm talking about a phone call that tells you everything about how the rest of the West looks at Golden State right now and what kind of arms race is coming. I'm talking about the Suns dialing in and making it clear they are willing to rip open their current roster, shake loose real rotation players, and stack picks if that's what it takes to pull Jonathan Kuminga out of the Bay and drop him in the desert next to Devin Booker. I'll tell you exactly why Phoenix thinks they can do it, what kind of package Golden State is being baited with, how this connects to the roster tweaks we've already seen this season, what it would mean for Curry and Draymond in the playoffs, and what it would say about what the front office believes about our championship window. I'll also tell you why this isn't just a normal rumor. There's real tension behind it. There's ego behind it. And there's risk for both sides. Let me set the scene so you feel the timeline. We're not talking about a Warriors team in chaos. We're talking about a Warriors team that opened this season punching, taking 2 of the first 3 games, looking like an adult basketball team built for May, not a desperate group trying to survive the first month. Stephen Curry is still the gravity engine. Draymond Green is still the surgeon. Jimmy Butler is now in the building and giving you hard possessions on both ends, giving you playoff backbone in October, which is something this franchise hasn't always had early in the year. And the front office didn't sit still this summer either. They went out and got serious adults. Al Horford with his IQ and angles. D'Anthony Melton with his length at the point of attack. Seth Curry to keep the floor honest. Gary Payton too to bring pressure. Violence and chaos every time he checks in. That's not panic energy. That's we're still here energy. That's we're not done chasing banners energy. But here's the thing. Even with all that, the one variable that everybody, and I mean everybody, in this league keeps circling is Jonathan Kuminga. He's the hinge. He's the one guy who changes the math for us and for anyone else. He's the player you feel when he's on the floor because the game suddenly becomes vertical. He's the one who takes a dead half-court possession and turns it into something loud at the rim without a play call, just off instinct and force. And he's also the test. He's the truth serum. If Kuminga keeps leveling up, the dynasty doesn't just fade into nostalgia. It gets extended and reshaped. If he stalls, if he plateaus, then the front office is forced into those ugly choices where you turn potential into depth just to survive a brutal Western Conference. This is where Phoenix smells opportunity. And this is where the disrespect comes in. The Suns watch what happened to them. They lost star power. They lost insulation. They're not living in that old version of we've got names. That's enough anymore. They know they can't just line up Book and a couple scores and expect to trade buckets forever. They need something they haven't had for real in a while. A violent, switchable, explosion wing who can get downhill without a screen. Who can defend across 2 or 3 spots without fouling out in 20 minutes. And who puts pressure on the rim without having to dominate the ball for 15 seconds. They are looking at this next phase of their build and saying, we need a forward with star upside who hasn't even peaked yet. Someone who can be here for the next 5 to 7 years. Not just the next playoff run. That's not subtle. That's them literally drawing a silhouette of Kuminga. Now, when other teams call the Warriors about Kuminga, usually it's nonsense. It's lowball stuff. It's here's an aging shooter and a pick down the line. What do you think? That doesn't even get past hello. Phoenix, and this is why we're talking about this seriously, Phoenix isn't playing it soft. The kind of framework that's getting discussed around the league that people are actually talking about looks like this. The Suns sent out a proven perimeter shooter who can defend his position, stretch the floor, understand timing, and play both with and without the ball. Plus a functional big who does the dirty work in the paint. Plus some level of future draft compensation. In short, they're not dangling one rotation guy. They're dangling multiple bodies and future flexibility to try to buy a single player. Kuminga. Let me slow down and be very specific about why that matters. That type of return hits every button the Warriors front office has been pressing since last spring. Button 1. More shooting around Steph that doesn't collapse defensively. Button 2. A real big body. Not a project, not a veteran emergency, but an actual playable center who can screen, finish, rebound, and soak up minutes so Draymond doesn't have to fight giants for 35 minutes in January just to keep us even on the glass. Button 3. Assets in the form of picks or swaps that give the team flexibility later at the deadline if a true star shakes loose. On paper, that's clean. On paper, that's efficient. On paper, that says, let Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond be the identity, and let the support system be deeper, more balanced, more playoff ready by April. But paper is not the same as May basketball. I want to be honest about that, Doc, because here's what you lose if you let Kuminga go to Phoenix. You lose the one player on this roster who can physically overwhelm a game without even knowing he's doing it. You lose a guy who can trigger fast break offense just by ripping down a board and going. You lose a guy who can start at the 4, switch onto a guard, survive in space, then turn around and take contact at the rim and still finish with his chest out. You lose something that doesn't come back just because you sign a smart veteran. You also hand it to someone you may see in a playoff series. And let's be clear, if the Suns land Kuminga, they're not hiding him. They're handing him the runway and saying, go. He becomes their slasher, their chaos engine, their matchup breaker. You want to talk about Western balance of power? Imagine Devin Booker with a wing who cuts from the dunker spot, punishes your weak help, and detonates at the cup when the defense leans one step too far. That's the picture Phoenix is looking at. That's why they're bold enough to even float these talks. We also have to talk about where Kuminga is right now, not just the idea of him. You remember where this was not long ago. There was tension. There was frustration about minutes. There was frustration about role. There was all this talk that maybe the thing had run its course. Maybe he wasn't going to get the touches he felt he deserved. Maybe the development track had stalled. That storyline is not ancient history. That storyline was this offseason. And then it flipped. He got his deal. He got clarity. He started the year not as a side piece, but as a weapon. Kerr gave him usage that felt respectful. The vets played with him like he was part of the plan, not just a kid trying to audition. That's important. That changes the entire emotional temperature around the player. And you can see it on the floor when he doesn't rush every touch. You can see it on defense when he's not gambling to get notice. You can see it in how he's embracing physical responsibility on both ends. That, right there, is what makes this such a dangerous decision. You be trading a player right when he's starting to figure out how to be more than just highlights. Now, let's stay in Golden State's building for a second, because this is where you get the chess logic. The Warriors are playing on multiple timelines at once. On one hand, they're still absolutely in the business of winning right now. That's why you bring in Jimmy Butler. That's why you bring in veterans who understand how to win possessions in the last 5 minutes. That's why you don't let Steph Curry carry every single ounce of creation load every single night in November. Because you want him alive and sharp in May. On the other hand, the franchise knows every dynasty ages. That's just how it works. You can delay it, you can reshape it, you can extend it, but you can't pretend it isn't happening. And the way you keep from falling off a cliff is you plant younger anchors while the old ones are still elite. Kuminga is that plant. He is the bridge. He is literally the outline of after Steph, after Draymond, we're still relevant. We're still dangerous. We're not going back to being just a nice team in the Bay with good attendance. So if you move him, you better get back something that doesn't just help, but actually keeps your ceiling as high or higher than it is with him on the roster. This is where the Suns' offer idea becomes both tempting and terrifying. Because the Warriors do need two things. They need dependable floor spacing that Kerr can trust in playoff rotations, not just a guy who can hit open shots in January, but a guard or wing who knows the reads in this offense, who knows when to relocate, who understands Curry's off-ball gravity and doesn't freeze when the ball finds him. And they need a center with functional size who can eat minutes without the whole defense melting. You've seen it. There are still stretches where Draymond has to play emergency five and anchor everything, and he can still do that. But we all know what it costs him. We've watched that movie. It's expensive in mileage. It's emotional. It's draining. If you can buy him help at the five, and also buy more shooting to stretch the floor, and also pick up draft flexibility, that's not just depth. That's rest. That's sustainability. That's buying more high-level minutes from the guys who define this franchise. But here's the catch, and it is a massive one. The minute you send Kuminga away, you are declaring to the entire league and to your own locker room who you are. You will be saying out loud, our path to another title is Steph plus vets, plus role players who know exactly what they are, not Steph plus the next monster we build in-house. You would be saying, we trust system and chemistry more than we trust raw. Explosion. You would also be saying to Phoenix, we believe your ceiling with Kuminga is something we're willing to live with. That's not small. That's pride. That's ego. That's legacy. That's how rivalries get written for the next 5 years. Let's flip the camera and walk into Phoenix's locker room for a moment. They've watched their version of the super team era get ripped apart and reassembled. They watch what happens when you go all in on names and then realize names don't stay 100% healthy for 100 games. So what they want now is someone who can become the next face of the franchise alongside Devin Booker. Someone who lets them say to their fan base, we're building something sustainable. We're not just patching. Kuminga fits that billboard. He's still young enough to sell his upside. He's already productive enough to calm the fan base right now. He's flexible enough to slide between the 3 and the 4, and in small ball, even take short stints at the 5 in certain matchups. And because of his physical tools, they can build a defensive identity around having wings who don't get bullied. That is the exact thing Phoenix has been missing in big moments. Someone who can switch, stand up a driver, absorb contact, and turn it into a live ball break. And now imagine Booker walking down in late game situations with a running mate like that who lives in transition and earns free throws without needing 20 dribbles and a screen. That's why the Suns are not laughing off the idea of giving up multiple useful pieces to get him. They think he's that important dot, so where are the Warriors in all this? Are they listening? Are they hanging up? Are they slow playing it just to see how desperate Phoenix becomes if they hit a losing streak? Here's what I'm being told to pay attention to, and I want you to listen to the details, not the noise. Watch the rotations in the next 2 weeks. Watch who closes halves. Watch how many touches Kuminga gets early in the clock, not just late when the spacing is already broken. Watch how often Kerr lets him attack from the wing without, forcing him to immediately give the ball back to Steph or Jimmy. That's how you tell where the internal trust is. If they're showcasing him to boost his number, you'll feel it. But if they're settling him into a, this is who we're going forward with, rhythm, that means they aren't preparing him to leave. They're building around him. And I'll tell you right now, from what I've seen so far this season, the vibe has been way closer to we're growing him than we're dressing him up for auction. There's also this, and it matters more than fans admit. The Warriors' culture is built on loyalty, but managed with calculation. This front office has made hard calls before. Nobody is protected just for being loved. If the right deal comes along that keeps the window open and buys structural help, they will consider it, even if it hurts. But they also have a sense of when a move becomes a message that can break the soul of the locker room. Trading Kuminga, after everything, to a direct Western opponent like Phoenix, in the middle of a season where the Warriors are trying to prove they're still a threat, not a museum tour, That is the kind of move that can split a room if it's not received as an obvious win. I'm telling you, guys feel that. Vets feel that. Young players feel that. Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, they all understand business, but they also understand tone. You don't send out a young two-way wing with upside for pretty good pieces and expect the room to just shrug and keep going like nothing happened. The return would have to be so clearly winning basketball. So clearly, this makes us harder to guard and harder to score on right now, that the vets could look everybody in the eye and say, "We got better, not safer." If it's anything less than that, you risk something way bigger than rotations. You risk belief. Let me say something that people on the outside sometimes miss. Golden State is not trying to be cute. They're not addicted to nostalgia. They're not pretending it's still 2017. They know timelines. They know bodies. They know contracts. They know windows. They're also fully aware that other teams in the West are tired of waiting for them to fade and are more than happy to help push them off the top shelf. The Suns are one of those teams. That's why this call isn't an accident. Phoenix is basically saying, if you guys are really about right now, prove it. Give us the next wave, and we'll give you the tools to survive this one. That's some villain energy. That's a dare dot. So let's land this in plain English, because I owe you that. The Phoenix Suns want Jonathan Kuminga. They are prepared to talk about real pieces, shooting, size, picks to make it happen. The Warriors are not shopping Kuminga just for the sake of movement, but they are always listening, because that's how serious teams operate. The question is not, will they trade him? The question is, does any offer make this team more dangerous in the playoffs than it is with Kuminga wearing blue and gold? Right now, I'm telling you, that answer is not automatic. You can argue both sides. On one side, more depth, more shooting, a real center to take pressure off Draymond, and draft flexibility to chase the next star if someone shakes loose at the deadline. On the other side, you keep a 22 to 23-year-old forward who is already scaring scouting staffs, who is finally settling into his role, who can attack mismatches and hold his own defensively against real talent, and who gives you an athletic gear nobody else on this roster has. That is the entire fight. That's the war inside this rumor. Now, I want you in this conversation with me, because this isn't just for front office nerds and cap guys. This is about identity. If you're running this team, do you pull the trigger if Phoenix comes hard and offers a shooting guard who can defend, a legit rotational big, and future picks for Jonathan Kuminga? Or do you slam the door, ride with JK, and bet on his leap being the reason Curry and Draymond get one more banner before this era is over? Tell me what you would do. Tell me in the comments if you trade him to the Suns knowing you might see him in a playoff series wearing their jersey, or if that's the line you refuse to cross no matter what the offer looks like. I want to hear from real Warriors fans, not casuals. I'll be in there with you. My final take is this. The fact that we're even having this conversation tells you how valuable Jonathan Kuminga has become, not just to us, but to the rest of the league. This is no longer a guy we're hoping figures it out. This is a guy other teams are lining up and saying, we'll give you 2 rotation players and draft assets for him right now. That's respect. That's fear. That's leverage. And the Warriors need to use that leverage the right way. For me, unless Phoenix gives up a package that clearly solves 2 of Golden State's biggest issues, reliable shooting in Kerr's system and real size that can play real minutes in real games, plus future flexibility, I don't move him. Not now. Not to them. I hold. I bet on his growth. I keep the ceiling. Because as long as Steph Curry and Draymond Green are still writing chapters in this story, I want Jonathan Kuminga next to them, turning regular nights into momentum swings. That, to me, is how you keep this thing alive. If you're with me and you want every next step on this, make sure you're subscribed to Warriors News Fan Report. Drop a like, turn on alerts, and stay locked in. Because if Phoenix decides to go all in, you'll hear about the fallout here first. from someone who's going to tell you what it means, not just what happened.